Part 4, Homo Sentimentalis. When Goethe faced the eternal trial, countless accusations and testimonies relating to the case of Bettina were brought up against him. Not to bore the reader with many insignificant matters, I will limit myself to 3 depositions that seem to be of primary importance. First, the testimony of Rainer Maria Rilke, the greatest German poet since Goethe. Second, the testimony of Romain Rolland, who in the 1920s and 1930s was the most widely read novelist from the Urals to the Atlantic, and who in addition enjoyed a great reputation as a progressive, anti-fascist, humanist, pacifist, and friend of revolution. Third, the testimony of the poet Paul Éluard, the brilliant member of what used to be called the avant-garde, a singer of love, or to use his own words, a singer of l'amour poésie, love poetry, for he considered these 2 concepts to merge into one, as we can see in one of his most beautiful collections of verse, L'amour, la poésie. As a witness called before the eternal trial, Rilke used exactly the same words he had written in his most famous prose work, published in 1910, the Notebooks of Malte Laurid's Brig, in which he addressed Bettina by means of this long apostrophe. How is it possible that everyone does not still speak of your love? What has happened since then that was more remarkable? What is it that occupies people? You yourself knew the worth of your love. You spoke about it to your greatest poet so that he should make it human, for it was still but a natural element. But he, in writing to you, dissuaded people from it. They have all read his answers and believed them because the poet is more comprehensible to them than nature. But perhaps someday it will become clear that here was the limit of his greatness. That lover was bestowed upon him, auferlegt, and he was unequal to her, hat sie nicht bestanden, i.e., he failed to pass the test Bettina represented. What does it signify that he could not reciprocate, wittern? Such love needs no reciprocity. It contains within itself both the challenge, Lockruf, and the response. It answers its own prayer. But he should have humbled himself in all his dignity before this love and written what she dictated. With both hands, kneeling like John on Patmos. There was no choice for him before this voice that fulfilled the angel's ministry. Die das Amt der Engel verrichtet, which had come to enfold him and carry him off into eternity. Here was a chariot for his fiery ascension. Here was a dark myth for his death, which he left unfulfilled. The testimony of Romain Rolland dealt with the relationship between Goethe, Beethoven, and Bettina. The novelist explained it in detail in his book Goethe and Beethoven, published in Paris in 1930. Even though he expressed his viewpoint in terms of fine distinctions, he made no secret of the fact that his strongest sympathies were with Bettina. He explained events in approximately the same terms as she. He did not begrudge Goethe his greatness, but he regretted his political and aesthetic cautiousness, so unbecoming to a genius. And Christiane? Alas, better pass her over in silence. She was nullité d'esprit, a spiritual zero. I must emphasize again that this viewpoint was expressed with delicacy and a sense of proportion. Epigons are always more radical than their inspirers. For example, I am reading a very thorough French biography of Beethoven, published in the 1960s. There, the author speaks directly of Goethe's cowardice, his servility, his senile fear of everything new in literature and aesthetics, etc., etc. Bettina, on the other hand, is endowed with clairvoyance and prophetic ability, which almost give her the stature of a genius. And Christiane, as usual, is no more than a poor, voluminous épouse, a corpulent wife. Though Rilke and Rolland took Bettina's part, they speak of Goethe with respect. Paul Éluard, in his Les Sentiers, et les routes de la poésie. Let's be fair to him, it was written in 1949, during the worst stage of his career, when he was an enthusiastic admirer of Stalin. As a true Saint Just of love poetry, chose much harsher words. In his diary, Goethe mentions his first meeting with Bettina Brentano with only the words, Mamselle Brentano. The distinguished poet, author of Werther, gave domestic peace precedence over the active deliriums of passion, deliriums actifs de la passion, and nothing of Bettina's imagination, nothing of her talents was to disturb his Olympian dream. If Goethe had let himself be swept away by passion, perhaps his song might have descended to earth, but we would have loved him no less. For in those circumstances he probably would not have chosen his role of courtesan and would not have poisoned his people by trying to convince them that injustice was preferable to disorder. That lover was bestowed upon him, wrote Rilke, and we may wonder, what does this passive construction mean? In other words, who bestowed her upon him? A similar question occurs to us when we read this sentence from Bettina's letter to Goethe, dated June 15th, 1807. Quote, I needn't be afraid to abandon myself to this feeling, for it wasn't I who planted it in my heart, end of quote. Who planted it there? Goethe? Surely that is not what Bettina wished to say. The one who planted it in her heart was somebody above both Goethe and herself. If not God, then at least one of those angels invoked by Rilke in the passage quoted. At this point, we can come to Goethe's defense. If somebody, God or angel, planted a feeling in Bettina's heart, it was natural for Bettina to obey that feeling. It was a feeling in her heart. It was her feeling. But it seems that nobody planted such a feeling in Goethe's heart. Bettina was, quote, bestowed upon him, end of quote. Assigned as a task. Auferlegt. Then how can Rilke blame Goethe for resisting a task that was assigned to him against his wishes and, so to speak, without any warning whatever? Why should he fall on his knees and write, quote, with both hands, end of quote, what a voice from on high was dictating to him? Obviously, we are not going to find a rational answer and must content ourselves with a comparison. Let us think of Simon, fishing in the Sea of Galilee. Jesus approaches him and asks him to abandon his nets and follow him, and Simon replies, quote, leave me alone, I prefer my nets and my fish, end of quote. Such a Simon would immediately become a comic figure, a Falstaff of the New Testament, just as in Rilke's eyes, Goethe had become a Falstaff of love. Rilke says of Bettina's love that it needs no reciprocity. It contains within itself both the challenge and the response. It answers its own prayer. A love that is planted in people's hearts by an angelic gardener needs no object, no response, no, as Bettina used to say, Gegenliebe, requited love. The beloved, Goethe for instance, is neither the cause nor the object of love. At the time she corresponded with Goethe, Bettina also wrote love letters to Arnhem. In one of them she said, quote, true love, die wahre Liebe, is incapable of infidelity, end of quote. Such a love, unconcerned about reciprocity, die Liebe on Gegenliebe, quote, looks for the beloved in every transformation, end of quote. If love had been planted in Bettina not by an angelic gardener, but by Goethe or Arnhem, love would grow in her heart for Goethe or Arnhem. An inimitable, uninterchangeable love, destined for him who planted it, for him who is beloved, and therefore a non-transformable, non-transferable love. Such a love can be defined as a relation, a privileged relation between two people. But what Bettina calls Varlieb, true love is not love relation, but love emotion, a fire lit by a divine hand in a human soul, a torch in whose light the lover looks for the beloved in every transformation. Such a love emotion, knows nothing of infidelity, for even when the object changes, the love itself remains perpetually the same flame lit by the same divine hand. At this point in our examination, we begin to grasp why Bettina put so few questions to Goethe in her voluminous correspondence. My God, just imagine being able to correspond with Goethe. Think of all the things you'd want to ask him about his books, about the books of his contemporaries, about poetry, about prose, about paintings, about Germany, about Europe, about science and technology. You'd flood him with questions until he'd be forced to express his views with the utmost precision. You'd press him into saying what he hadn't said before. But Bettina does not exchange opinions with Goethe, nor does she discuss art with him. With one exception, she writes to him about music. But it is she who does the instructing. Goethe, evidently, is of a different opinion. Why is it that Bettina does not question him about the reasons for his disagreement? If she had known how to question him, Goethe's answers would have given us the first critique of musical romanticism avant la lettre. Alas, we'll find nothing of the kind in that voluminous correspondence. We'll find precious little about Goethe, simply because Bettina was far less interested in Goethe than we suspect. The cause and object of her love was not Goethe, but love.